guys, I'm Kate. Welcome back to my channel. And I have been asked a lot recently. It was actually one of the most popular questions in my Q&A, and I just figured I'd hold it for this video. Why do you have a pen name? Why do you have multiple pen names? What are sort of the pros and cons of pen names? Will you ever tell us the pen name you're publishing under, and why are you waiting to tell us? So I figured I would answer all of the questions here. I've talked about it a little bit before in videos, but yes, one spot right here. First off, I should say that obviously, like, author names are important in some respect, because of course this is how readers are going to know you, identify you, and even like when we're writing fan fiction, when we think about the username we're gonna have, like, we're recognizing that this is what the readers of our fan fiction will see. They'll be like, this is Blake's story. I know when I did Harry Potter fan fiction, I chose Exploding Snap because it was a small reference in the books, and I was like, haha, look at how clever I am at 13 years old, or whatever it was. In fact, I still remember, can I get it right? Was it Padfoot Prongs 07? I think that was my favorite author on the Harry Potter fanfiction website. It's in my brain. That's what I'm trying to say. I have it. Kate Cavanaugh, in fact, is a pen name. Lots of you know that at this point, but I do have some people who like brain explode when they hear it. And I think the biggest reason to consider a pen name, which is one of my reasons, was like searchability. So you might want to consider this if you have a very popular name. You might want to consider this if your name is exactly like a famous author, a la the Stephen King example. There is a story about a also very real Stephen King who published, and people like derided him on Goodreads and in other spaces because he was trying to profit off of the famous Stephen King, even though of course his name was Stephen King. How many times can I say Stephen King? A sip of water after that. So whether it's because you want to be more easily searchable or you don't want to be searchable. So I was still in the midst of like, I didn't know if I would need to return to my corporate finance life, and I did not want any of the books I publish or my YouTube channel or anything like that to be searchable when you're looking for me, the finance person, right? So that's why I decided on a pen name. If you don't want your family and friends to know that you're publishing, that might be a reason that you publish under a different name. Maybe you want to hold your book in your hands, like I have. Is it in the screen? That shelf holds my friends Becca C. Smith and Emily Bourne's books, which are under their very real names. And I know that they both, you know, enjoy getting to see their name on the back spine of their books. That is something huge to consider. That could really matter to you. And there's nothing wrong if it does matter to you, of course. So one thing though, if you are going to go indie and are going to publish under a pen name, you will have to pay, at least in Texas, a little bit of a fee to come up with a business entity, as it is not your legal name that you are publishing under. So it's slightly more expensive. I think it was like 30 bucks or something, and a little bit more of your time. There are debatably other reasons that you might want to establish a business instead of just doing it under your name. Anyways, again, it's really up to you. This is also helpful though if you decide that you want to publish under multiple pen names. So let's move on into that segment. Why multiple pen names? The easy answer, the answer that makes sense to me, is because I personally write in very different genres and in different age groups and in different levels of like quote unquote maturity. Right? That also means that the voice tends to be different, at least of course that is my goal, to have my young adult voice much different than my like romance voice. Honestly, I think my YA fantasy voice and my YA contemporary voice are a little bit different, but you know. So a famous example of this is Nora Roberts. She writes in a lot of different subsets of romance. So there might be some paranormal romance sprinkled in there, but like romance. And then you have her pen name, J.D. Robb, which publishes the long-running In Death series, which is like this futuristic cop story. There is some romance in it, but it's not at all in the same capacity as this. And it's completely different. And I say that as someone who enjoys and loves both. So you have that. You might have a reader who does enjoy and love both, but there are plenty of romance readers who don't want to read the gore of some of these deaths that happen in this series. And there are plenty of the people who come for the gore, who come for the like somewhat police procedural, who are not gonna want to stick around for like an entire book of romance. Conversely, you have the Rick Riordans of the world who publish middle grade in the Percy Jackson series, but also published their own adult series under Rick Riordan. He kept his name. Now, I think there might have been a little bit of a time gap between those two, but like I've shown my sister-in-law Callie on the channel and she talked about her love of Rick Riordan's adult books, and that was actually something that she wanted to sort of dabble in, was his middle grade, and see if she liked it. Whereas my brothers grew up reading his middle grade books, and then one of them enjoys the adult ones, one of them doesn't. There you go.
Hello, Editing Kate here to say that I did not go as in-depth on like reader expectations here as when I'm now watching it back I should have. So some people think that you can do it all under one name, but if Rick Riordan were to all of a sudden publish, you know, his next book as an adult book, you would have a lot of confused readers. There are already authors who struggle with, you know, people complaining that they're working on one series and not this series, or wanting this book when they really get this book announced next. And so I think for a lot of authors it's easier to like mitigate that reader confusion and reader disappointment. So you can debate how necessary that should be in theory versus what people tend to do in practice.
So I'm not saying if you want to write across multiple genres, across multiple age ranges, you must get a pen name. It's just another thing you'll want to consider. I will also link some podcast episodes down below where you can hear more people talk about their journey in deciding if they wanted to take multiple pen names. Some of them who didn't have them at first and eventually came to the conclusion that that's what they needed. And this is where we're going to get into the more nitty-gritty of things, because if you're an indie author, you don't necessarily have the huge publishing house behind you to sort of push the marketing in a certain way. And as an indie author, I think, and I will link them down below, I think some of the authors I've heard range from like 50% of their sales are from Amazon to some authors who publish exclusively off of Amazon. And I think 50% is the low end personally of what I've heard. And Amazon has their algorithm, much like YouTube, there's an algorithm involved. And what can happen is there is this also bought section where you click down below, or anything also to do with ads, this will be important. But the also bought section is the way Amazon gets you to like, ideally spend more money. Hey, if you like this, you might like this. Try it out. It's their recommendations of sort. Now, when you're looking specifically at authortubers, you're going to find that a lot of their also bots are their fellow authortubers. Whether the books are anything similar at all, or would be in each other's also bots otherwise, what you want, the ideal, is to like, who's a big thriller author? If you were writing thrillers and someone is buying on Amazon and they're looking up Ruth Ware, you want to be in her also bots. You want to show up as the person, the author, that people bought books from who also like Ruth Ware. And I'm not judging authortubers based off of sales or anything like that, but it is a quite insular sort of thing. And your audience, in my head, ideally, my audience is not the people watching AuthorTube, as this is primarily like writing chat. You know, that doesn't mean writers don't read, of course they do. But that's a very specific subsection when I want to make it as broad as possible. And while some of my projects, a lot of my YA ones, could fall in line with other AuthorTubers, there is a huge YA presence here. My adult romance is not what I want appearing in also bots from YA fiction, okay? That's just not gonna be good. Doesn't mean that those people won't like it. I read a lot of romance when I was growing up. I read romance that, like, you know, in quotes I shouldn't have been reading, who cares? But that's still not the audience. You know, I want my audience to be as broad as possible, and that just really narrows it down, and that's telling the algorithm to really narrow it down. So that's the nitty-gritty of why I decided to have a second pen name, and why I decided not to tell anyone about that pen name for a while. Let me see. Consult my notes. Oh, yes. So while this decision was easy for me, I'm someone who was already going to publish under a pen name, so another pen name is not out of the ordinary, not crazy, not something that I was closed off to considering. If you want to consider it, there are some extra things that you might want to think about, which is like extra website costs. You'll want different websites. I've been redoing my website for forever. It's actually one of my final 2020 goals to finish, but I'd been trying to figure out a way that I could combine them all into one website and adjust. In conclusion, could not figure out a way to do it. So you're going to need to have multiple websites. That's additional costs. If you pay for anything associated with those websites, there are a lot of free newsletter sites that are like, as long as you don't go over a certain amount of people on your listing, but that might be another cost that you would have to consider. Duplicate costs also in terms of ads potentially. If you want to run ads, if you have the additional money to run ads, obviously if you have 2 pin names, you'll either have to split that, do it all in one, come up with more money to do it in both. Like, that's some additional costs that you won't reap the benefits of for both pin names. But then you have duplicate costs in terms of time spent. So you're going to be wanting to build up multiple pin names, which takes, yeah, it just takes more time. So as hard as it can be to build up the reputation of one author name, one author brand, you're now going to be doing it with 2. So there are some pros and cons here, I feel like, where, you know, you can learn some lessons on one and not carry them over, but someone else who's just under one pin name isn't gonna have to do it again, right?
Okay, even more belated editing Kate here. Because I talked about reader expectations earlier, I figured I would bring this back in to the duplicate costs, because of course, if you're trying to build up 2 pin names concurrently, you know, unless you're willing to take a multi-year approach, which kudos to you, totally an awesome plan, totally valid, you know, you will be writing in one section and maybe publishing at different rates under the different pen names. And there's only one you, the writer, but there are now 2, 3 you, the authors, with multiple books and different readers who want more of your books, ideally, right? Let's say it takes you a year to, you know, from draft 0 to publication, it takes you a year to do this. If you have 2 pin names, what's actually happening on the reader's end is that it's taking you, you know, your releases every 2 years potentially if you're switching off. So it's just things to consider, the reader experience versus you, the author experience. Yeah.
Personally, for me, I sort of revel in the idea of getting to build up 2 brands. I think there's also something to be said for, because I like to write in multiple genres, some genres or some books are going to be hotter than others, and if I'm not always relying on my new release under the only pen name I have or only whatever, it's nice to sort of spread the wealth, I guess. Romance is occasionally a hotter genre at times. Sometimes YA books really pick up. Thrillers can be really hot. If you're just spreading that out but you have some backlist items, you never know what could come of that, and I just personally love writing in multiple genres too much to not do that. And of course, even though I said AuthorTube is not my target market for these books, in fact, I think, I don't know how many romance readers there are in AuthorTube land. I don't know. We might be a small but mighty voice. I know there are several AuthorTubers who are doing it, and I'll link them down below, but I don't think it is the majority, is what I'll say. So while I do think some of y'all who are watching this would love to read my romance books, and I would love to share at some point. Actually, the idea would just be if you read my stories not knowing it was me. That would be great. So while I said that AuthorTube isn't my target market, I will eventually let y'all know. I want to share stats and numbers, but I think I'm gonna do that in quotes anonymously for a while, where I'll just not tell you the pen name, and then we can kind of play around with seeing if there is any sort of boost. I'll link down below. Alexa Dunn has made a great video talking about, you know, does YouTube help book sales kind of thing. But I do, of course, want to share, you know, what I've learned, the numbers and expenses. I might just do that at a slightly delayed rate, especially because the money itself comes in at a delayed rate, much like YouTube. Certain freelance projects, you get paid like a month, month and a half, 2 months later sometimes. Or if you're publishing direct, you know, you would actually get the money directly. What I'm saying here is not like a one size fits all, but I am hoping to share. It's just probably not going to be for a while. Finally, I do want to share some people who are actually already doing the kind of revenue and expenses sharing. I will link her video down below. Keelan Rivers did that recently and I really liked her video. Chris Fox does that a lot. I always say the lackadaisical writer, Sherelle Winters. I really enjoyed her podcast while it was live, and I feel like it gave a good glimpse into people starting off their careers, because while I enjoy the Chris Fox, the Joanna Penns, the self-publishing shows, Mark Dawson's of the world, they're a little bit farther along, and I think I don't want to say success stories because that implies others aren't a success, but I think that they're like, you know, occasionally the top 1 to 5% of what self-publishing looks like. And I think it's really nice to see someone starting their journey and sharing their numbers, and also someone who has published multiple books and they're in a niche topic and, you know, they're not going to be making humongous mega dollars off of their novels, at least not yet, and sort of getting to see that pivot potentially to something that might be in quotes more marketable, or, you know, staying the course and doing their weird fun novels that they love. So anyways, I will link everything down below if you want to explore this more, but please do comment down below and let me know what you think of pen names. Let me know what your fan fiction username was. Let me know if you've seen any others who shared their revenue and expense reports, whether that's just a blog that you've really enjoyed. I would love to know about it. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon with a new video. Bye. And 2 other pen names. Hi Zelda. I know. I've shown my friend Callie, my friend.